culmination of an angle. They really didn't have a main event, right? The main event was Logan Chase and Darrell Morris in that cage. What they had to have was retribution, was justice served. Darrell Morris has been running around acting like an ass, doing his job as a heel. He had an obligation to get in that cage and pay it off. An obligation, since they didn't have anybody covering them with the match, right? A truly great match. They're the only match in the cage. There was only 5 matches on the card, 4, and then intermission, and they went into that match. That's not color. It's not even a trickler. A trickler, though you're always embarrassed if you get a trickler, at least it runs down your face. You can. I wrote down a bunch of things to call that the color. I guess we're going to call it that. And, you know, the raspberry jam and all this other stuff. And somebody else in Georgia, a prominent figure in Georgia, came up with rug burn. And I was pissed. I was so pissed because it was better than everything I had come up with. But then I think I'm going to call it the not so scarlet letter. Moving forward for that promotion, right? If it's true that Woody is no longer going to be an owner in it, and it's QT Marshall, so it's QT Marshall and Darrell Morris, is that why he turned face? For fuck's sake, if you turn face off of that non-existent blood, it hurts the whole angle. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe nowadays fans won't really care, even old school fans like GPWs. But how can you feel fully satisfied? Fully satisfied with, you know, he's the biggest heel in the company, disrespected Woody, he just ran roughshod over everything, and then it comes time to pay it off. Nothing. I mean, that's nothing. Is it the biggest deal in the world? I don't know. Here's a story. In PCW, we had some legendary blood and blade jobs. We didn't do it often, and I'm a big believer in doing it for huge effect. Here's a story, and it's the story of the one time somebody did not get good color, or color at all when they were supposed to. But it's a story of redemption, too. So at Sacred Ground 2, Mason was our big baby face, and he was going against Grotesque, who was our champion, evil champion, in a cage. And Mason wanted to get color. Made sense. Grotesque was like our horror movie monster. But Mason didn't get color, and then Grotesque couldn't help him get color because he had these big gloves on. So they tried to do it hard way, and it didn't work. But you know what the payoff was? Mason didn't need help to get sympathy in that match with the blood. It would have been nice, but he didn't need it. And ultimately, Grotesque brought a chainsaw into the ring, and he had used that chainsaw before for terrifying effect in many PCW shows. So when he went to pull it, and luckily it didn't start, that was the beginning of Mason's comeback. And Mason also went to the top of the cage and did a flying headbutt off the top of the fucking cage to beat Grotesque. All was forgiven, all was forgotten, but Mason himself didn't forget that he didn't get the color. The boys made fun of him for it a little bit. Cut to Sacred Ground 3. Biggest show, PCW history. biggest match in PCW history. Shane Marks, who had been the Empire champion since that thing's inception, and Mason, who had been the PCW champion all the way from Sacred Ground 2, were going to meet at Sacred Ground 3. It was the payoff of the Empire angle that started before Sacred Ground 2. Empire took over PCW on 11/11/11 and kept it going all the way for 10 months. We called it Empire Wrestling, and it wasn't PCW anymore, and lots of twists and turns. By the way, on 11/11/11, yours truly got color to signify the Shane Marks heel turn, and Jay Fury as well, and I got better color. You better believe the picture of me, blood streaming down my face, out of it, babyface sympathy. That's what you do. You get the color. When Jeff G. Bailey wrestled Rachel in the part of the War Games, Jeff G. Bailey got fucking color to pay off all the horrible things he had done to Rachel. It's what you do in wrestling. I don't want to hear it. If you're going to do color, you got to do it great. If you're a heel and it's the culmination of you torturing the baby faces and then it's time for your payback, you owe them that color. If you're going to do it, there's other ways to get around it. Jeff G didn't get color for me at Sacred Ground 3, but I popped him with that belt. He took the bump. Everybody went nuts. Yeah, it's about paying off. And if you're going to do a heel turn where you're switching to babyface and you don't have color, I don't even know what the fuck that is. But anyway, back to my story. So Mason wrestled Shane Marks, and he got busted open hard way. And it's horrific. Blood pouring everywhere, to the point where the crowd went from just pro wrestling, ooh, to genuine concern. Mason's in the ring with Shane Marks. Shane Marks, one of the best ever. I'll stand behind that forever. Right? They're barely at the beginning of their match. It's the first big spot they did on the outside where it happened. I'm in the back. I see what's going on. And wrestlers, hardened wrestlers, are freaking out. Steve, you've got to stop it. We've got to stop it. I looked at Mason. A couple times he made eye contact with me to signify, stopping shit. Right? Blood pouring down. Gash. He's bald too, so it's just this gash on his head. Blood's pouring. Shane Marks, consummate pro. They have a bunch of things they need to do. This is, again, the most important match in PCW history. A culmination of the greatest show that we had done up to that point. It needed to be great. But Shane Marks was like, let's just cut to the end. The part where basically the managers attack one at a time. The Empire had 4 managers, right? Jonathan Malik, Marty Freeman, Rachel, and Jeff G. Bailey. And so I had conceived of this spot since 11/11/11. And keep in mind, Sacred Ground took place, it's like September 25th. So you're talking 10 months. I had conceived of this spot. I'd started with this image of 4 managers all trying to cheat for the heel champion and getting leveled one by one, finally paying off those 4 things. But then they had a bunch of wrestling things they were going to do before that. And so Shane Marks was like, let's just go to the finish. We can just go to the finish. Because Mason was bleeding badly. And Mason said, fuck no. It's like, this has been building for like a year and a half. Like, no, I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. And Shane Marks, to his credit, helped him get there. But they did their match. And when those manager pops happened, first it was Malik getting plastered. Crowd goes nuts. Then, Marty Freeman gets up there and Mason kicks the cane out from under him and he goes toppling down. They go nuts. Rachel jumps on him. Now, Rachel never got hit. Mason picks her up, swings her around, drops her down. Crowd loses their mind. Loudest crowd at a PCW event up to that point. But then Jeff gets him. I remember Jeff put the ether rag on him and the blood running down Jeff's hand and towel. What an image, right? Puts Mason down, wakes up the referee forcefully, throws him in there. Shane Marks covers. 1, 2. Mason gets the shoulder up. Mason kicks out of the ether rag. Place loses their minds. Was blood necessary for all of that? No. Did the blood amplify everything to the nth degree? Yes. Mason goes on to win that match. Thunderous applause. And afterwards, his girlfriend, who would become his wife, and now his ex-wife, wanted to pull him away, and Mason was like, no, let me bask in this. I went, I cleaned the cut, bandaged him up. I mean, it was crazy amount of blood. Paramedics were there right away to check on him, but he wanted his moment, and he deserved his moment. You know, there's people who wanted me who put up pictures, that picture of Darrell Morris and whatever, online, and said, I can't wait to hear what Platinum says about this on Tuesday on the radio show. We're probably not going to talk about it on Tuesday. I wanted to do this video first in a series I'm going to do of just wrestling stories, and I just wanted to tell the story of Mason's redemption of blood. Does blood matter? I believe it does. Is it something that's going to go away in wrestling? Probably. But on the rare occasions when it is done, when it's done right, it's done well, and it's done effectively, it can change your reputation. So the question is, did that not so scarlet letter change Darrell Morris's perception in the eyes of many? Probably not. Would it have been a more convincing payoff if he had bled a lot? Yes. Would it make his sympathetic babyface turn much better? Yes. I can think of no bigger symbol of Woody not being one of the shot callers in that promotion anymore. Would Woody have gotten massive color? I believe so. Again, is it the end all be all? Should it be the end of GPW? No. Was it a case where they just didn't prep? Didn't do the goodies powder beforehand? Drink a few beers, whatever guys do to find their place to get cut? Did somebody not show him how to do it properly? Did it just not work out? I don't know, but I would imagine that arrogance had a little bit to do with it. Of, yeah, I'm going to do it. That's part of the ritual of wrestling, why we cut ourselves. Is it stupid? Like Simon Sermon has always said, you just get a cup of blood thrown on your head. He's not wrong, but there's something about attaching yourself to tradition. And in wrestling, it's, you got to get that color if you're going to do it, man. Mason wasn't able to do it, but he was a wrestler, right? He did his thing in the ring. And when he couldn't get the color, his payoff was, I'm going to jump off the top of the cage. Mason never left his feet. So for him to go to the top of the cage and dive off showed, you know. And then the next year, it's the measure of a man. Mason does not wrestle anymore, probably never will again. But he'll always have that moment. It can never be taken away from him. And it made a match that was, you know, I said once in a Pro Wrestler's Handbook that the object of the main event is to create the hype and live up to the hype. Now, that match could not have had more hype. You're talking about a year and a half of an angle being paid off in a single match, right? That's as much hype as you get. Packed Sacred Ground 3. Every show leading up to that was packed. 11 was insane. We had 50 seats and 100 plus people. It's nuts, right? Did it live up to the hype? I think that match would have lived up to the hype regardless. But the blood makes it legend.